Welcome, folks, to the 96th episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. I'm your host, Mark Hasara, and for over 60 years, my passion has been everything aviation. On the Lessons from the Cockpit show, we debrief some of the most intriguing and fascinating pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even private aviation environments? The purpose of our show is to illustrate how does the aviation world work, but more importantly, increase critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. Some of the stories that you're going to hear on the Lessons from the Cockpit show are being told for the very first time. This episode is brought to you by the book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, found on Amazon. But folks, I now have the only softback copies that have color pictures in them. So if you DM me or get a hold of me, I can sign one for you and send it to you. Costs $27, $20 for the book, $7 for the postage. And folks, all the proceeds, if you buy it from me, go to the Airlift Tanker Association's Scholarship and Heritage Foundation. So it's a tax deductible. Also, subscribe to my channel here and go join my All Ranks Club Patreon channel. Those of you that join at the designated driver and at the by the bar levels get Q&A one-on-one with me, one-on-one phone calls, virtual bar night. We're going to start after the first of the year on Thursday nights. And I've got some stickers like the ones you see here on my wall above me. Not quite that big, 7 inches of famous airplanes, the profiles that you can stick on any flat surface like water bottles or windows or whatever. Laptops, come join my Patreon channel at the All Ranks Club. All right. Everybody's been asking me, Mark, what are your comments on this shoot down in the Red Sea, this blue on blue engagement? So let's talk about that. Grab an adult beverage of your choice. Sit down, strap in, and let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit show and talk about blue on blue engagements. Because believe it or not, there's been a few of them, and we're going to talk about that. I've been asked, people have been texting me, all kinds of things, folks. Mark, what's up with this USS Gettysburg blowing away a VFA-11 Red Ripper Super Hornet? And a lot of you are probably asking, why would an Air Force guy know about this? Well, folks, actually, I have a lot of experience with this kind of thing because you see, when I was at the Air Force's weapons school teaching at the KC-135 division, my block of instruction was everything Navy. Our instruction was right out of the Navy's Naval Strike and Air Warfare Manual. We taught Air Force tanker crew members out of a Navy publication, a classified publication that talks about how they do all of their long range planning, all their long range strikes, how they defend the carrier battle group. And that at the end of 6 hours of instruction on that manual, a couple of the instructors, all of the students, we'd hop on an airplane, we'd go down to San Diego and stay for 2 days, sometimes 3 if we got stuck on the aircraft carrier because the cod broke. We had 17 learning objectives on a cruiser or a destroyer with the Aegis system. We were on Princeton, Cape St. George. We went on a number of these Aegis cruisers and heard from the crews how they do their business and how their systems work. So I have some pretty good knowledge of the Aegis cruiser because that was the asset, one of the assets, the surface asset that was defending the tankers whenever we were refueling blue water ops with the carrier air wings. And in one particular exercise, it was the USS Constellation's what they call final battle problem or Comp 2X. We actually got to spend a lot of time on a cruiser with a tactical action officer, which was very fascinating. So I have been around Aegis Cruisers. I think I've been on 8 of them now because of teaching at the KC-135 Weapons School. On the flip side of that coin, the other asset defending the tankers obviously was the air assets. And so we spent a lot of time in the ready rooms asking the question, okay, we're refueling the carrier air wing. How are you guys going to defend us from the air? And of course, at that time, we had F-14s and the legacy F-18s. The Super Hornets didn't come until a little bit later. But I remember being on the ramp at Oceana just after VF-11 Red Rippers and their F-14 Tomcats traded in their F-14B models for F-18F Super Hornets. And remember seeing them on the ramp. Their F-14s parked on one side and their F-18 parked on the other from the Red Rippers. And somewhere I've got a ball cap like the one I'm wearing with the Red Ripper symbol on it, the big hog head. So, folks, I've got some education and training and some practical knowledge and application of how this works, particularly the Red Sea, because as all of you know, the Red Sea is a hotbed right now. And so, what I want to do is just kind of walk through some of the questions I have and some of the capabilities and limitations of the Aegis cruisers and destroyers and the carrier air wings. Now, bottom line up front, what was the Gettysburg shooting at? I'm wondering if they were engaging something else and maybe the Super Hornet got in the way. There's going to be a lot come out during an investigation, and a lot of this is just opinion and supposition on my part. But that's one of the first things I thought was they're in the Red Sea. We know that there are drones and cruise missiles being fired at the Navy, commercial shipping. And so my first question was, what was the Aegis cruiser really firing at? My second question was, did the Super Hornet crew know that they were being engaged? There is a lot of calm during these kinds of intense situations. You have the Aegis cruiser that is obviously looking at things. You have the E2 Hawkeye that is directing traffic, calling out targets. I mean, this is a really complex system. And it actually harkens back to World War II. And just to kind of give you a little historical perspective, uh, kamikazes. They called it the big blue blanket that covered the carrier battle groups during World War II from the kamikaze attacks because those are kind of suicide one-way drones and cruise missiles in a way, even though they're piloted. And so this kind of defensive system harkens all the way back to their experience in the Battle of Okinawa, particularly where the U.S. Navy aircraft carriers came under the most prolific and intense kamikaze attacks of the war. Now, I lived on the island of Okinawa and obviously read a lot about Operation Iceberg, as it was called, and the invasion of Okinawa. And the Japanese really, really put an intense kamikaze plan and attack against the carriers and the Navy destroyers. Go look up the story of the USS Laffey and what it survived during this time period. Now, the carriers had radar, the tin cans, the destroyers had radar, the cruisers, even the big battleships had radar during that time and could direct traffic. And a lot of the kamikazes were picked off by the Hellcats, the Corsairs, and so forth during that time period. But You see, folks, we've been fighting this kind of a war for quite a while. And the lessons go all the way back to World War II and the big blue blanket. Now, obviously, it's more sophisticated. Many of you know the Aegis cruisers and destroyers have been knocking down ballistic missiles up above 300,000 feet with this new SM-6 missile. There has been some very intense battles in the Red Sea when the Houthis have been firing a lot of one-way kamikaze drones, cruise missiles, and even some ballistic missiles. Not in the numbers that we have heard earlier in the year, but they're still doing it. So that brings me, as I say, to my first question. What was the situation? What were the events that the USS Gettysburg launched either a missile? Some say it may be phalanx. I doubt that because that's a close-in weapon system. I'm thinking SM-6. And this is a very, very good missile, folks. What was it actually shooting at? Was it literally a IFF problem and the Gettysburg thought that the Super Hornet was an attacker? Because I've been on Aegis cruisers and destroyers, I know how that system works because it was an integral part of how do we defend the tankers. And so we had some really good education and application during the weapons school on how that worked. The Aegis cruiser system you can program like a lot of radars, like a lot of radar systems, even Patriot you can program. And the term that they used when I was on board was called doctrine. And they can put rules and limitations on the system, kind of a if this, then this, if this, then this kind of format, so that this kind of thing doesn't happen. And one of the things that they stress to us, obviously, because we asked the question, okay, you guys aren't going to launch on us, right? And we were told pretty much the system can't do that. If you're squawking the right codes, mode 1, mode 2, mode 3, mode 4, then the system is incapable of firing at you because it recognizes you as a friend. You could also put in that Aegis system geographical points. You could put in it airspace because we could actually refuel out in front of the Aegis cruisers and they wouldn't fire at us. And we developed a defensive plan where the tankers would actually get out of the way if something happened. And they could identify us not only by our modes and codes, but by course, speed, altitude, and safe lanes, right? Now, they have what's called debug procedures where everybody kind of funnels through one point, and that's how they know, hey, this is a good guy. Anything outside of those, bad guy. And I'm trying to be real careful here, folks, about this. So, knowing about the Aegis system like I do, I'm curious as to why they were firing, why they were firing in the direction of the Super Hornet. Why did the Super Hornet get tagged if it was squawking the right modes and codes and was doing the things that the Aegis doctrine calls for? And sorry, I got my hair cut this morning. And how did this happen? Now, this isn't always a foolproof system, obviously, because it has human interaction in it. And even though I'm talking about a different system, I want to tell you also about we have had blue on blue situations like this before. During the shock and awe campaign, the army was moving very quickly up toward Baghdad. And they had one of their Patriot batteries that was inside Iraq protecting the force in what they called the automatic mode. And unfortunately, in this automatic mode, they shot down an RAF Tornado and killed the crew. And of course, during the investigation, it came out, well, you know, we have it this and this and this and this automatic. And everybody went, wait, what did you say? Automatic? Yeah, automatic. And we went, and when we found out more about the automatic, we went, nope, it was in the spins, the special instructions, do not put that thing in automatic. Because if somebody accidentally doesn't come to the right point at the right altitude, the right airspeed, we don't want Patriot engaging them. Well, guess what? I think it was about 2 weeks later, another Patriot battery in automatic shot down, I believe it was an F-18 off the USS Constellation and killed that airman, that sailor. And I remember the command, the Combined Forces Air Component Commander that we were working for, General Mosley. He was upset. He was livid that we killed somebody else on a blue-on-blue engagement after we'd already said, don't do this. During those investigations, you know, we found out even more about how the Patriot battery works. And of course, it's very similar in structure, radar, and in doctrine as the AEGIS system. Now, I've sat at a AEGIS controller's station, watched what she was doing, and was able to ask a lot of questions. So a lot of my questions are based on that conversation with her about how good the AEGIS system really is. I mean, it shoots down satellites. The USS Princeton shot down a satellite, and it hit within 6 inches of the aim point on a satellite that was moving at satellite speed, at satellite altitude. So the system's extremely accurate. And my question is, why? Why did the system engage this Super Hornet? And fortunately, both crew members were able to get out and survive. One with minor injuries, it says, but we lost an airplane. And of course, the Houthis came out and said, oh, we shot it down. No. But again, this system is very accurate. You can program it to look for certain things. You can put doctrine in it to keep it from shooting at certain things, particularly friendly forces. And yet we had a blue on blue incident. So it'll be interesting to see how the investigation comes out. Now, for the Super Hornet, they've obviously are on the net. They are in the links, which, of course, the AEGIS Cruisers reading and seeing. The Hawkeye's controlling all of this. And the Hawkeye crew have got to know, hey, there's a friendly airplane right here. And of course, where all the friendly airplanes are, where all the enemy are. So this is very comm intensive, and everybody's talking to each other. And I don't understand how in the world this happened with the knowledge that I have. And the Super Hornet has gone through several upgrades. It has some incredible avionics on it for self-defense, for knowing what's going on around it, situational awareness wise. And of course, who's firing at it? Who's engaging it? And I don't know the ranges we're talking about or the speeds we're talking about. It just says Red Sea. Did that crew have warning that this missile was coming? I don't know. But I'm very surprised that this has happened, because knowing about the systems the way I do, having been on see, 8 Aegis cruisers and I think 12 Aegis destroyers. They all perform the same functions and have pretty much the same kind of equipment in them. Obviously, the cruiser holds more missiles or has the capability of holding more missiles, I guess I could say. You know, it can hold missiles, Tomahawk land attack missiles also. A lot of things go in the vertical launch system. Hmm. So there's a lot of questions that have to be asked. How this engagement took place. My opinion only is there was some intense situation probably going on that required the Aegis cruiser to engage. Something that was coming from Yemen, and maybe the Super Hornet got in the way. And it was just a coincidence that the flight path of the missile and the flight path of the Super Hornet uh, caused it to converge, as we should say, because the situational awareness that the crew had in the cockpit, the air crew in the back of the Hawkeye had, and of course the folks in the Gettysburg had, they had to have known, hey, we've just launched on a good guy. And I spoke to you about the intense days that the USS Eisenhower is having where airplanes were launching off 5 minute alert to trigger squeeze, to shooting down drones and cruise missiles. And obviously, you can engage those cruise missiles, drones, and ballistic missiles with SM-6 missiles off of the ships, the cruiser or the destroyer, or you can do it with the Super Hornet, with the Hawkeye providing situational awareness, the cruiser or the destroyer also doing the same thing. So I guess we wait for the investigation, but thank heavens the crew is safe. Understandably, a little disappointed that we lost a multi-million dollar airplane, a very sophisticated airplane. And now it's time to figure out, how did this happen? Because we haven't had a blue on blue situation like this, I think, since shock and awe when these Patriot batteries were engaging the Tornado and the Hornet that were on their way home. I remember very vividly the point in space that you had to go through. It was actually in Iraq, but everybody coming through, or excuse me, leaving Iraq had to go through this gate. Um, it was tall in height, uh, I think 5 miles wide on each side, but it was kind of the delousing, debugging spot that everybody had to go through. And sure enough, because a system was put in automatic, it engaged two friendly airplanes and killed two in the Tornado and one in the Hornet. It'll be interesting to find out why this happened. And as you can see, there's a lot of people jumping on this. You know, how did this happen? There's other podcasts that have been talking about this. I'm really anxious to hear what Ward Carroll, Mooch Carroll, has to say about this, because he's a Navy Tomcat guy, and I'm sure he's going to talk about this. But there are really good fail-safe um, equipment, procedures, tactics, techniques, and procedures that are used when doing blue water operations in intense environments where you have targets coming at you that are supposed to keep this from happening. And this type of mistake from ever happening. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what the report says. It'll be interesting to read that. I just thought of one more thing. The Patriot system is very similar, like I said, to the Aegis. It has doctrine. You can program it. You can program it for, speed, course, altitude, points for delousing, just like you can the Aegis system. These are very, very sophisticated systems. They are extremely good at picking out low, high flying targets, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles. I have a TikTok post, and I think it's on my YouTube channel that's got millions of views that show a cruise missile being launched from land and being intercepted by two SM missiles off of a destroyer. And the first one hits the cruise missile, the second one hits the debris. And I'll put a link to it in the show notes down below. But folks, this is very unusual, very rare that you have this kind of blue on blue engagement. Like I said, I haven't seen anything like it since the Shock and Awe campaign in March and April of 2003. So that's my take on that. More to follow, obviously, as the report comes out, and I'm sure we'll hear from the Navy about what happened here. But this automatic mode for the Patriot proved to be deadly. Hopefully, the automatic mode on the cruiser was not engaged, if there is such a thing. And I'm glad that the two guys are safe with one only sustaining minor injuries. Okay, one other thing that I want to mention that's been going on too is these bomber task forces. As many of you know, the B-52s, B-1s, even the B-2s will deploy to Fairford, RAF Fairford in England. Beautiful freaking base, folks. We used to go there as the tanker task force. And the other one's on the island of Guam, Anderson Air Force Base, where we used to have the Pacific Tanker Task Force, another great location. The bomber task forces, particularly in Europe, have been what we call show of force. They have been flying through Poland. They actually had a B-52s land in Romania earlier in the year. But one of the other interesting things, and here's a video of it, is the NATO airplanes that are escorting the B-52 as it flies through different kinds of airspace. And notice the different types of fighter jets that are escorting it. You have MiG-29s. I believe those are Romanian. You have Gripens. You have Typhoons, F-35s, F-16s, all of these different airplanes escorting the bombers. Because when they go up in the Baltic, they always get intercepted by Russian Su-27 flankers. And the Baltic has become kind of an interesting playground, folks, because the RC-135s, the rivet joint goes up there, and that's kind of a common route for it to collect on things going on, electronic intelligence, signals intelligence. And as you heard in the news, an Su-27 accidentally fired at RJ, and the RJ was able to skedaddle out of there. Now, let me talk about that for just a minute. During an exercise over the Korean Peninsula, the rivet joint that had been flying out of Kadena was monitoring the border between North and South Korea as part of this exercise, and was also participating in this big Korean exercise, South Korean Air Force, Army, a big exercise that we did every year called Full Eagle. One of the commanders of the F-15 units thought it would be really cool to make a run on the RC-135, and they actually locked it up without telling the rivet joint. And I'll never forget the debrief after this. The rivet joint crew actually came back, landed fairly closely to when the rest of us did. And the rivet joint colonel said, "Who the hell's idea was it to make a run on the rivet joint and lock us up?" And this particular commander sheepishly raised his hand and said, "Hey, we're just kind of running around, not doing anything, and just thought it'd be a good idea." He goes, "Why didn't you tell us?" And Well, sorry, we didn't communicate with you and everything. And I'll never forget what that colonel said. And I'm paraphrasing, but this is pretty close. He goes, when you locked us up, it looked like Christmas back there. Meaning all of the sensors, all of the alarms in the rivet joint went off because the F-15 radar goes into a different mode when it locks something up. And of course, the RJ thought it was being engaged. Well, fortunately, the ray gun of the radar was not coming from the north, it was coming from the south. So they knew that it was one of the F-15s. And of course, they said, hey, if you're going to do that, coordinate with us next time, okay? Because a lot of us were shocked back there and came home with dirty underwear because you did that, And the commander said, I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You know, but they've been flying missions up into the Baltic and they've been getting intercepted. And there's been a couple close calls. And as I mentioned, they had the one flanker actually shoot a missile, missed. Um, they've had some really close calls with flankers flying in front of them and in the Baltic. And of course, the B-52s have been making a loop through the Baltic too, as well as up to the North Pole. So these bomber task forces are just a way of saying, look, don't mess with us. All right. We have weapons we can put on this airplane, conventional weapons that we can put on this airplane that can reach well inside people's borders here in Eastern Europe. We have obviously air launched cruise missiles, but now they have the Joint Air to Surface Standoff Missile, JASM, and just regular bombs too. B-52 also has a sniper pod, targeting pod that's on it. So these task forces are really a big deal. The Tiger crews out of Mildenhall have been refueling the bombers when they go up on these missions and refueling some of the fighters. There's some really, really good video on the Defense Visual Information Distribution System, DVIDS, of these bomber task forces and the tankers, refueling all these different airplanes. Excuse me. The Mildenhall tankers are kind of an unusual unit that they have a number of their airplanes that are configured with the MIPPERS pods, the multi-point refueling pods, the basket pods that are out on the wings. So they can do both types of airplanes, boom and drogue. So it doesn't matter what NATO fighter comes up, they're able to refuel it, which as a tanker crew makes for some pretty interesting pictures because you'll have like Dutch F-16s or F-35s, RF Typhoons. Um, yeah, we can refuel MiGs with that thing. It's compatible, believe it or not. I don't know if MiGs is in the Dash 3 or not, but that system is compatible. So these bomber task forces are a big thing. And we've seen them in the Pacific also. Here's some footage from the 909th Air Refueling Squadron, my old Young Tiger Squadron, refueling a B-52 that's out of Guam that is flying through the South China Sea as a show of force for the Chinese and flying around the Spratly Islands and just kind of saying, hey, we can come here whenever we want. They normally don't have escort down in the South China Sea. But the Australians have flown their airplanes up there also. Their P-8 Poseidons, just like ours, are air refuelable, boom refuelable, and they've gotten some very good intelligence and video in the South China Sea from the P-8s. So these bomber task forces, I think you're going to see a lot more of right now. Under the next administration, just going to have to wait and see what future Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth will do, what kind of message the President Trump, President-elect Trump is going to send, and we'll go from there. But believe me, when a B-2 bomber shows up that's stealthy, can carry 85, 500-pound bombs, That's a big message, because now you have an airplane that sneaks in pretty much impervious to radar and sensors with long range weapons such as JASM that can really reach out and touch someone. That's all I've got to report. Folks, Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. Please come join my Patreon All Ranks Club. Those of you that join at the designated driver or by the bar levels will have one-on-one time with me. We'll have question and answer periods. I'm really looking forward to these bar nights, these virtual bar nights. And I'm looking at Thursday, 7 o'clock Mountain Time. And we just get together and talk about things aviation, answer questions, hear your stories, and really looking forward to that. If you join the All Ranks Club, as I mentioned to you, we had some new stickers made, and this is one of them. If you join at the designated driver and the by the bar, you get one of these every month. They peel off. They go on water bottles, laptops, flat surfaces. They are dishwasher safe and are really cool. This happens to be the F-117 tail number of a very dear friend of mine, Hoser. So those of you that join at that level will get one of these every month. And we're working on the next 15. We have 1,000 of each of these. So there's actually 10,000 stickers. And yes, you can buy them as a complete pack of 10 for those of you that don't want to join at the designated driver or the by the bar levels. I have framed these things. I hope this shows up correctly. So we did go out and get them framed. As you can see, I sign on the bottom of them. There's only going to be a handful of these made because they're extremely difficult to pack and ship. But we haven't figured out a price for these yet. But again, here's the first 10, and we're looking at the next 15. They include U2S Senior Spur, obviously F-35, an F-18, KC-135, the RC-135S Cobra Ball, Focke-Wulf 190, and some other ones that I'm not going to talk about. So please go enjoy these stickers by joining my Patreon All Ranks Club on Patreon, and the link is down in the show notes. Appreciate all of you joining me, all of you chiming in, and I particularly enjoy many of you have sent me things for Christmas. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really do appreciate it. Episode 96 of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. Sluggo signing out here.